Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. Today is Friday, September the 13th. We are previewing Saints and Cowboys. It's Friday the 13th. Something weird might happen. That might be good for the Saints if something weird happened up in Dallas on Sunday. That might mean they're 2-0 because Cowboys, despite the Saints' great performance against the Carolina Panthers, the Cowboys are significant favorites in this game. We'll talk about that. We will break down the game, and we will get all these guys' opinions about what's going on, talk some injuries, all that good stuff. First, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in 60 seconds.
Fellas, it's clear why Caesars brought us together. This is the ultimate quarterback roundtable.
I think I know why we're here.
What? Quarterback, high school, Oklahoma?
I thought that was a musical.
Garth, I think you're here because when people use Caesars Sportsbook, they earn with Caesars rewards. Things like celebrity chef dining, Vegas vacations, even tickets to your show.
This app is over the top. There's the idea.
Bet with Caesars Sportsbook. Earn Caesars rewards and see your favorite quarterback, Garth Brooks, in concert.
Hey, you can't throw like that. Ooh, I see at least 3 of them in there.
3 what?
Possums, big rats, I don't know.
Clarify big.
You're gonna have to gut it.
How much is that gonna cost? Maybe I should just move.
Maybe.
Is that your van?
Hi, strawberry mango. Mm-hmm. Here you go. Thank you. I'll take another one.
All right, Saints Insider Podcast, previewing Saints and Cowboys. And I got to say, Rod, you've covered this team for quite a while now. This is it's crazy how much 1 week can change things because no one was excited about the Saints. And now this feels like one of the more anticipated regular season games the Saints have played in a few years.
Yeah, it's almost crazy to see this is a noon game. It should be a primetime game, it feels like. That both teams coming off really impressive wins, and obviously we know about the fan bases of both teams and how passionate they are. But, yeah, I think things really perked up around New Orleans after the beatdown of the Panthers.
They're getting the primetime treatment from Fox.
Tom Brady's in town.
Tom Brady, Kevin Burkhardt, Aaron Andrews, Tom Rinaldi.
Luke Johnson.
I'm going to be out there, which is what everybody cares about.
Jeff Duncan may even make an appearance.
He might. Nobody cares about Jeff. Nobody cares about Jeff Duncan. I mean, look, this is exciting, man. I don't think any of us saw last week coming, right? I think we saw like the potential for them to have a good game offensively and for them to handily beat the Carolina Panthers, even though I think Matt was the only one who actually predicted something like that. But nobody saw them just completely dominating that game, all 3 phases, leading the NFL in virtually every major offensive statistic, right? So yeah, it's definitely setting up a more intriguing matchup than I think people were willing to give this one before the season started.
And Matt, like the other part of this is there's some intrigue because we're not quite sure if are the Saints that good, or the Panthers that bad. I mean, can they step up in class? It's not just that it's an exciting game. It's also like it's almost like you're unwrapping a present and seeing exactly what's inside here.
Yeah, like as much optimism has maybe built locally, nationally, I think the Saints are still kind of where they were. You look at power rankings this week, and they're still in that 23-24 range. It doesn't feel like they've gotten a lot of national respect for like blowing out the Panthers, but then again, I don't know if they should be having a lot of national respect for that. I think the offense did look a lot better than we all thought going into week 1, but the Cowboys, they're quite a different test.
I think the power rankings are. I mean, generally, as an exercise, it's ridiculous. But like, it was always funny to see the Saints ranked like 28th in the power rankings. Right. It's like nobody thinks they're going to be that bad. Everybody just thinks they're boring. It's a completely different thing. And like, if we're going into the season, you're looking at, can the Saints be really good? Sure. Can the Saints be middle bad? Sure. Can the Saints be one of the worst teams in the NFL? No way. Right, it was always like ridiculous from the outset. I think that the big concern was whether they were going to be like middle of the pack bad again, and they're just kind of stuck in that middle of the pack rut. But like it was always absurd to see them at like 28th, 30th in the power rankings.
I mean, Derek Carr would have to get hurt for that to happen, I would think.
Right.
I mean, they would have for them to fall apart like that.
But I will say that people have had absolutely no respect for this team coming into the season. I think that's true on like literally everywhere I looked, and I still think that's very much the case because everybody's like, well, the Panthers are just bad.
Yeah, that's what you hear. Is that's just the Panthers. They're
Right.
terrible, and what may help the Saints almost as much as competing with the Cowboys in Dallas is the Panthers like not looking awful against the LA Chargers and like showing like, hey, that was actually a decent team that
come on,
decent,
man.
Okay.
We got to get you
I know
off
where
your
you're
Carolina
going with this,
Panthers
but they're not historically bad NFL team level. Like they can at least compete, right? That's where I'm going with this. So
But they might be.
they might be, but that's why I'm saying I think it would help if they could show that they're not. I might have been completely wrong in saying that they would be decent.
Yes,
but,
you were.
We shall see. Want to let you know that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Trust everybody made it through the storm okay. I know there's some flooding, some power loss. Rod, you were day and a half without power?
That was about 24 hours.
Yeah, not fun. So if you did have some hardship, we pray that those are going to pass quickly for you. And by Sunday, you'll be able to sit down and watch the game. We'll have a post-game show. And we encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about the channel. Hit the little bell. Sign up for notifications. And while you're at it, hit the like button for us. So let's get into the game. Betting line is Cowboys -6. Game's at noon on Sunday. It's on Fox, as we said. Cowboys are 6-point favorites. This has bounced a little bit. I think it got up to 7. It got down to like 5.5. It's at 6. Our friends over at Caesar Sportsbook, the over/under is 46.5. And so kind of an average over/under they're looking at, and Cowboys by about a touchdown. I'm sure we'll touch on this. Part of this is like the Cowboys have been really damn good at home.
Yeah, what'd you put? I think I was reading it in our predictions file. 16 straight regular season games they've won at AT&T Stadium, and average margin of victory is
17.5 points.
That's crazy.
Average margin of victory, which is crazy high. I mean, you go back and look through the scores, it's been 35 points, 42 points, 44 points, 31 points. I mean, every week they're just putting up huge margins. Now, having said that, their last 2 games at AT&T Stadium that counted were a blowout loss to the Packers in the playoffs, and then a Saturday night game, I think it was on New Year's Eve against the Lions, they probably should have lost. So it's not like they're unbeatable at home by any stretch, but like Rob, they've been very good there.
Yeah, and actually when I was looking at those numbers, I knew about the streak, but I didn't realize how much they had dominated, and well, I won't get into what it almost made me do, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about predictions.
We'll talk about that later, but yeah, I mean, they've just been really good at home, and coming off of a impressive road win at Cleveland, I mean, they're going to be really fired up to come back home and give their fans something to see. Dak just signed a big contract, so he's going to want to kind of prove himself for his own, in front of his home crowd.
It's interesting. You've covered a lot of games in Dallas. You used to cover a team in their division. Is this like a coincidence? Is it just a good team? I don't think of AT&T Stadium as this house of horrors for road teams. You see that fans all rush in for the standing room seats and stuff, but I don't know that there's anything about it that necessarily makes it that much more difficult to play.
I mean, I think it's one of the better stadiums in the NFL. I think, for a stadium that big, some of the modern stadiums that you get, that are built after AT&T Stadium, are kind of lifeless and cold. That place still comes to life, even though 70,000 people pack in there every Sunday. It's a really impressive atmosphere, and they've been able to. I mean, they're good at home because they're a good team. Let's not overestimate oversell it. They have a very good roster, and even though they've lost some pieces, that was the thing that was probably most impressive about their Week 1 game is they still were rolling offensively.
The times I've been to the stadium, I didn't really think it was really intimidating, though, and I think that's kind of what you were kind of alluding to. But, I mean, it's obviously a lot of people, but you get a lot of the visiting fans, I think, because the stadium is so big, and I don't know, I just didn't find it as intimidating. So I think that's why the 16 straight regular season home games was really impressive to me to see them do that. But again, it goes because of how talented they are.
Yeah, you think of like intimidating home atmospheres. You think of Arrowhead Stadium. You think of whatever the Seahawks are calling their stadium now.
Lumen Field, I believe.
You think of the Superdome. Like Baltimore, I think.
Lambeau.
Yeah,
FedEx
Lambeau
Field.
with the elements. But you don't really. What'd you say, Matt?
FedEx Field for
outta
the
here.
opposing team.
Poor Norm hates it when we hit the bell, I think. Look, but could it be that, and we're just underselling it? I don't know.
I mean, it's hard to ignore those numbers, right? There's something to it. Winning 16 straight games is hard enough in one building, but doing it by such huge margins, I mean, that's eye opening, and there's got to be something to it. I'm kind of with you, Rod. I think I've been to 2 games in that stadium, and wasn't just like blown away by the atmosphere, but obviously there's something to it. You know, they're really good there.
Well, you guys, so 2021, and then when was that? Like,
they played there in 19. Maybe it was 18 and 19 that I've been there.
Maybe so. Yeah.
It might have been back-to-back years, I think, because when they played in 21, it was in the Superdome. That was Taysom Hill. It was a Taysom Hill quarterback game. He threw 4 interceptions and ran for 100 yards in that game. It was wild. Actually, somebody brought that up to him. He's like, yeah, I'd like to forget that game.
All right, let's begin our breakdown. We're going to start with the injuries. We do not yet have the Friday injury report, but a couple of really significant names missed practice for the Saints on Thursday. That was Taliesin Fuanga, who would be lined up theoretically against Micah Parsons, and that would be Marshawn Lattimore, who would be lined up theoretically against CeeDee Lamb. Of course, the Cowboys could move those players around and change that, but you don't like to see those 2 names as a Saints fan on the injury report.
Yeah, maybe 2 out of the 4 guys you'd least like to see on the injury report. To me, I think the Fuanga one is the biggest one, because now you're just talking about like the potential for this being like a house of cards in the Saints offensive line. You could take probably their second best offensive lineman out of the lineup, the one at a more critical position than Eric McCoy, who I think is one of the NFL's best centers. So then you're talking about maybe sliding Landon Young over to left tackle, but Landon Young had to fill in and play guard.
Lucas Patrick is on the injury report as well.
So
Yeah.
then you're talking about potentially having to fill in with your 6th and 7th offensive lineman in your starting lineup, and then like what happens if one other guy gets hurt? You're really down to like kind of bare bones there against one of the NFL's better defensive fronts. That one's scary. I think the Lattimore one I'm less concerned about, just because I've seen this team have success even against really good receivers without Lattimore in the lineup. And CeeDee's going to move all over the field regardless. You know, maybe they travel Lattimore with them, which I think the Saints can do, because they can move Alontae Taylor to the outside if they need to. But yeah, the Fuanga one has potential to be really, really devastating for this offense.
What's the chance? Fuanga missed some training camp practices, missed a preseason game with his back issue, Matt. Could it have just been like a rest day, like, hey, let's get him off of it, it's sore? What's the feeling you get there?
I mean, Thursdays aren't normally the rest day. Wednesdays are normally that, and he was limited during Wednesday's practice with the back injury. So I don't know. We talked to Dennis Allen later today. Hopefully we get some sort of update. He's not the most forthcoming with that, but we'll see. I do think it's significant enough to, I mean, the line is 6. I mean, is that the difference between them covering or not? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm overrating like a rookie left tackle, but he was that impressive in week 1. And like Luke mentioned, it just kind of all. Landon Young, I thought, played well at left guard, but tackle is a different. He's an okay swing tackle, but you don't want him being a starter.
Especially against a super athlete.
Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah, if he's going up against as somebody who's like Calais Campbell or something like that, still the advantage would go to Calais Campbell, but it's a different sort of matchup when he's going up against a 245-pound guy who runs a 4.4.
Yeah, I think Fuanga would struggle in this game. Like,
I think so
if
too.
he plays, even if he was healthy, I think he's going to struggle. So, it's not great, Bob.
Yeah, it feels like, Rod, if you're Fuanga and there's a chance you can play in this game, you really want to go test yourself against Micah Parsons. The Saints really want you to play. It feels like a game where you'd do that if you could.
Yeah, and I'm kind of hoping, like what you said earlier, maybe they are just saying, okay, we just got to let this back rest this week, and we just got to take our chances because you are better off with him than anybody else. So I think if he can play, I expect him to play. But
they are conservative with this stuff, though.
Right.
And this is something they have been in the past. They're going to have a tough matchup the next week against the Eagles too.
And that's the thing. It's week 2. Like if playing him is going to risk him missing 3 or 4 weeks, well, then you just say, well, we're going to have to take our chances against the Cowboys and get him healthy. I mean,
yeah.
So, Tyrann Mathieu also limited at practice. He's the one we didn't mention, but seems like he's trending toward playing.
Yeah, I feel very confident he'll be out there.
Okay, so we'll start our breakdown as we do when the Saints have the ball. We talked a lot kind of in the preseason about the Cowboys' run defense. Not always the best, and it actually wasn't the best last week, even in a decisive victory. They gave up, I think, 4.5 yards per carry, but some of that was
4.9, but it was like
Deshaun Watson scrambles.
Yeah, they gave up like 95 rushing yards, and Deshaun Watson had like almost 45% of those on scrambles. So, the fact was that the Browns passed the ball in something like 70% of their plays last week.
They were behind.
They were. But I think that's exactly a script the Saints don't want to be in. So, anyways, I'll let you go back into it. But there was I think some extenuating circumstances behind the Cowboys' run defense last week.
And on the other side, the Saints in the first half against the Panthers ran for 6.4 yards per carry. That ended up, I think, right at 4.9 also. But some of that's in the second half. Everybody knows you're running. You're just running to bleed the clock out. They were very impressive against the Panthers. And it's pretty clear, Rod, like the Saints want to run the ball. The Cowboys, if they have a weak spot on their defense, it's probably against the run. Like, you can see where this is going. They really, really, really want to establish the run.
Yeah, and if they can keep it up, I mean, the run blocking was good last week against the Cowboys. I mean, the key to beating them is not getting those third and longs. We kind of wrote about that in the 4 burning questions about this game. If you can keep the Cowboys from, just being able to rush on third downs and just kind of move the chains like that, I think the Saints will be fine. So we'll see if they can do it, but it's a tall task, especially if they're going to be injured. If Wonga's not playing, I mean, that makes it that much tougher. But I do think that is the recipe to beating this team is just being able to continue to run like they did last week against Carolina.
And part of that, Matt, too, is like Derek Carr, one of the most efficient passers in the NFL last week. He does much better historically his whole career. His numbers are much better in a clean pocket than they are under pressure. So you got to keep the pocket clean. But if you could keep that threat of Derek Carr's throwing a real accurate deep ball, make the Cowboys respect that all helps too.
Yeah, and I think there's opportunities for them to do that. They're missing Deron Bland, and who led the league in, I think, in interceptions last year. Trevon Diggs is a corner known to gamble, so I do wonder if they can maybe get him on one of those. They don't seem to have the most steady linebacker group. Eric Kendricks, who is a very well-respected veteran, but he's very old. Like, I just wonder if there are opportunities to kind of go after them deep. And so, they were able to open up the deep passing game last week because of the run, but they hit on 6 explosives in the passing game, and Derek Carr was really sharp. Like, there are things that Clint Kubiak did that really kind of opened up that game, and you have to give credit to Carr for taking advantage of that and seeing that. And as long as he can kind of maintain that rhythm, I do think I think the Saints can move the ball on the Cowboys, even though this is a really impressive defense.
I think one of the things I'm looking out for is seeing how this motion, this pre-snap motion, the Saints they use on 49 of their snaps last week.
Yep.
Seeing how this impacts a really aggressive Cowboys defense, and a Cowboys defense that is, like, Eric Kendricks aside, is loaded with like super athletes. If you can get those athletes just a half second slower, I think that could really open things up for this offense. So that's I think I agree with both of y'all's points. I think establishing the run is going to be super important this week, and I think they're going to have to try to do their best to put a lot of window dressing on this thing and make that Cowboys defense have to think before it reacts.
Yeah, and the motion really just creates a split second of extra guessing. Like, you look at Rashid Shaheed's 59-yard touchdown from last week. He motions from the right to the left. You can see one of the Shaq Thompson kind of drift with him. He doesn't go all the way over because you don't want to put a linebacker on a receiver. But then their safety from the top drops down a little bit. And you can see him checking in with J.C. Horn, like just for a second. And then the play snaps and Shaheed's gone. Like it's just a split second where the Panthers defense was trying to guess what the Saints are doing.
That's all it
and
takes,
that's all they needed.
Well, yeah, especially when you got Shaheed running.
No, go ahead.
I'm sort of expecting to see a little bit more Taysom Hill. They used him a lot last week, and then they kind of didn't have to because the game sort of got out of hand. So I sort of think Kubiak may have been, I mean, obviously he didn't have to show a lot because the game got out of hand so early. So I'm just thinking that the Saints offense may show some things that we didn't get to see last week.
Rod's just looking at Kubiak like you sandbagging SOB.
Well,
no, there's more in the
stole
tank.
my point.
There.
I was thinking, like, of the 49 motion snaps, you have any idea how many were in the first half?
28.
Yeah,
I was going to guess maybe even a little higher than that, but it seemed like they went very vanilla once the game was in hand. Taysom, I don't think even had maybe one touch in the second half. Yeah. They really toned down the game plan. Obviously, you're up 30-3. You can do that. But it seems like there's a lot more where that came from.
Well, yeah, to Rod's point, I mean, we heard Alvin after the game saying that, like, people used to tease him about Taysom stealing his touchdowns. Well, Kubiak went to, like, Kamara for 4 plays in a row to get him a touchdown. Like, if it's a closer game, do they do that as well? Like, do they try and mix in a Hill? I think those are kind of the opportunities for Taysom to get in there a little bit more.
Okay, switching around to I knew Luke's happy about that. Switching around to when the Cowboys have the ball. They won 33-17 in Cleveland. The offensive numbers were not that impressive for the Cowboys. And again, some of that's game state. Like you just, like the Saints, you sit on the ball when you have a big lead. I think they had 290 yards. They had 101 rushing and 189 passing, if I have that right in my memory. Dak Prescott was like 54% completion. I mean, obviously Cleveland's got a good defense.
Yeah.
It's not like Dallas had some juggernaut offensive day.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of stuff from last year we can throw out. Obviously, it's a completely new year, but I mean, Cleveland was the best defense in football last year. So, I don't want to take too much away from their like kind of relatively modest offensive numbers because I still think that Cleveland could be really, really freaking good defensively this year. They, like the Saints, have stud players at all 3 levels. I think Dallas did a really nice job mitigating Myles Garrett's impact last week. He was going up against a rookie offensive tackle in Tyler Guyton, and they pretty much made him a non-factor in the game. So I still think Dallas is not as potent as it was last year. You got Dak, and you got CD, and you got a couple of really good offensive linemen. And beyond that, I mean,
skill players.
Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert. I think I'd prefer the Saints receiving core, even though they have the superstar at the top.
Should mention Jake Ferguson, the tight end.
Jake Ferguson,
he's hurt,
dealing with an injury.
I think he's limited practice yesterday, so there's a chance he plays.
And then your running backs are Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle, and maybe we'll see Dalvin Cook come off the practice squad. I don't know. I just think that their skill position guys outside of CeeDee Lamb are not really inspiring a lot of fear. Their quarterback is really good. Their receiver's really good. I think their line is really solid. But I don't know if this is going to be the Cowboys unit that puts up 32 points a game again this year, or whatever it was last year.
Yeah, and they got a punt return for a touchdown. They helped them get to 33, some short fields, things like that. Rod, when you look at this Cowboys offense, the offensive line has been the engine for that thing for so long. And I think almost to the point where Dak Prescott doesn't get the credit for how good he's been. Now, he did get the huge contract. Obviously, he's getting credit financially. But now this is kind of a rebuilt offensive line. So we'll see. And Dak got sacked 3 times last week, again, against a very good defense. But the Saints have a good defense, too.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas is starting a rookie at center, Cooper Beebe. And so I don't think they run the ball as well up the middle. And, I mean, Zeke had, 40 yards, I think, on 10 carries last week. So just like on the other side of the ball, I think the key for the Saints is going to be to stop the run and force Dallas into some 3rd and longs, and you hope you can wreak some havoc like you did last week. And, they forced all the turnovers and had 4 sacks. So the Saints need that kind of game again, and it's going to start with what they can do on 1st and 2nd downs.
Saints did not have a sack from a defensive lineman. They had 3 from Alontae Taylor, one from Demario Davis last week, so they're still looking for that. As far as the running game goes, one thing I noticed, I think the Cowboys were less than 4 yards a carry, Matt, until you added in CeeDee Lamb had 3 carries for 25 yards. He busted a long one, so you got to watch for him out of the backfield too and putting him in motion.
Yeah, I think Lamb is the obvious. You have to double team him whenever possible. You have to. I'm interested to see if Marshawn Lattimore doesn't play. Does Paulson Adebo travel with him? That's something we haven't really seen in the past. How does Kool-Aid McKinstry perform stepping in there? But Lamb is the one for me that is just, the Cowboys clicked offensively last season, late last year, when they just decided, all right, forget the other guys, we're just going to get the ball to Lamb. And they motioned him all over the field. They lined him up at different spots. He's one of the best receivers in the game. I just think they're going to try and attack this defense through him. It kind of reminds me of last year in the Rams game when it was Puka Nacua who had such a dominant performance. Did Cooper Kupp even play in that game? Was he? Can't remember off the top of my head, but it feels.
I don't think so, because it was Puka Nacua and Demarcus Robinson who were doing most of the damage in that game.
But it kind of reminds me of that, where they're just gonna try and focus in on one guy over and over, and we'll see if the Saints can stop it.
And Marshawn Lattimore again hasn't practiced this week, had the injury throughout training camp, so we'll see if he can help out on that front.
I would be shocked if he plays.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. And CeeDee Lamb, I think when you look at PFF tracks where they line up, I think last week he had 20 receiving snaps out of the slot and only 10 out wide. So if Marshawn doesn't play, like we're kind of expecting, you'd expect to see a lot of Alontae Taylor on.
Right.
So this is going to be like a big litmus test for him, because a lot of people are very confident about what he's done this offseason as a slot corner and how much he's learned from his experience last year. The test doesn't get any harder in the slot than trying to guard CeeDee Lamb. So we'll see how he does there if that's the case.
All right, quick discussion on special teams. One thing I noticed, Blake Grupe hit these 250-plus yard field goals last week. Like every team in the league had that. Kickers were 20 of 21 on 50-plus yard field goals in the NFL in week 1, which is like the sort of rate that made them move the extra point back. I mean, it's like 95+%. So I guess it's just you just expect that now. But both teams have good kickers. Both teams have pretty good return games. We saw Rashid Shaheed almost bust a couple and get good returns last week, and then Robert Turpin did bust a punt return for a touchdown for Dallas.
Cavante Turpin.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Who went to Neville High School, by the way. I saw him at the state championship his senior year of high school. He was phenomenal then, and he's still kind of doing his thing.
So and the Saints have good coverage units, but boy, you better be on your game.
Robert Turpin was a fun player back in the day.
That was a blast from the past.
The Saints will need their punter to punt better than he did. Matthew Habel to punt better than he did against Carolina. His 2 punts were pretty brutal, and you punt like that to Dallas, you're going to probably end up paying for it.
Yeah, he's punting with a 37-point lead. He's going to have to actually do something this week, you'd think.
I'm curious to see if the Saints are going to continue to operate the way they did on kickoffs. I think Darren Rizzi sees a potential advantage to not kicking the ball through the end zone, and finding different ways to kick the ball. You can kick it a lot of different ways to make sure it lands in the landing area, right? And you can use direction as your friend here, but it is a little bit of a different animal when you're kicking to Turpin versus whatever Carolina was throwing out there. So I think it's going to be fun to see that this week and just see whether they go with the touchbacks like a bunch of NFL teams are, if they go kind of their usual thing.
Yeah. JT Gray is like Bill Belichick's favorite player and everything. Do you think he's Tom Brady's favorite player too? Guess we're going to find out.
I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson is Tom Brady's favorite player.
By the way, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he's back with the Eagles, right? So he's coming to the Dome next week.
That's right.
Looking forward to that. Do a whole pod on that. Let's take a break. Norm is desperately trying to get us to take a break. We're going to take our last break here, and we'll come back with keys to the game and predictions for Saints Cowboys here on the Saints Insider. Welcome back to the Saints Insider Podcast. Saints Cowboys predictions right around the corner from our team. First, we're going to do keys to the game. Also want to let you know, Saints fans, that Associated Grocers is hiring. If you're looking to join a team dedicated to supporting independent grocers, apply today. Your future starts here. And Associated Grocers does sponsor our keys to the game segment, guys. We talked about this. Lots on the line here. What is the number one thing, Rod? I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead. The number one thing that the Saints need to do to come out of AT&T Stadium with a win?
Run the ball well. I think they just have to run the ball well, and I think that just opens up everything else for them. So I'll just keep it pretty simple with that.
I teed it up for Rod. You guys got to come up with something else now.
A, Rod's right. But B, when you're looking at this defensively, I think there's an obvious path for the Saints, and that is to take advantage of the 2 or 3 plays a game where Dak's going to give you an opportunity to make a play on the ball. This is something he's had issues with throughout his career, but especially as of late. They're going to take their shots, and they're going to put the ball up there and try to let their guys go make plays, and the defense has to capitalize on those chances. I think the Saints have done a nice job in the last 2 years of doing that. Last year, +1 game, right? I think they're. It was. I saw some stat on NFL Pro where they were, I think, number 1 in the NFL last year on interceptions of passes traveling like 15+ air yards, and they're good at those, and they're going to have their opportunities because Dallas does like to push the ball downfield. Does like to take its shots. So if you can get a turnover or 2, I think it really helps your chances in this game. It's always like the most key statistic in any NFL game, but like this is going to be their chance to really pull an upset here.
Steal an extra possession or 2. That's a big deal.
We haven't said his name yet, which is probably a record for this show, but Trevor Penning.
I thought you were going to say Chase Young.
No. If Trevor Penning can play like he did last week, the Saints might be fine on the offensive line. Like, if Uaga doesn't play, then Landon Young becomes maybe the weak spot that Dallas goes after. But if he's healthy and Penning is there, like, I just am really curious to see how, does Dallas try and pick on him with Micah Parsons? I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence is still a really good pass rusher as well. I just feel like that's a spot maybe that the Cowboys will try and attack, and if they can hold up fine, I just feel like that has the potential to swing the game for Dallas, is the offensive line, particularly Penning spot.
I do think the Saints have to get off to a good start. I mean, I think if Dallas jumps on them, it can snowball real fast. So I think getting off to a good start.
Yeah.
On either side of the ball, if they have first ball, they don't have to score, but I think you can't let Dallas come out and get a double-digit lead on you early in the game.
Yeah, I mean, that game script played out perfectly for him last week. Right, opening drive, touchdown, pick on the first play of the game. You're up 10-0 before Carolina even runs its second offensive play of the game. That allowed them to do everything they did last week. Right. So this is not a team that is going to be built to come from behind this year like it was last year.
Yeah. What's the Saints' confidence level right now? I mean, they always seem high in training camp. Are they feeling from the locker room you guys get? Are they buzzing for this game? We saw Chase Young say, "I'm not tripping on the Cowboys" and all this stuff. They seem pretty geared up for this.
I don't know. I think at least in their public comments, they've been they've been playing almost the same game that we're all playing. They're like, God, wait and see. Week 1 was great. Let's see what we're made of here. I think that's how I'm kind of reading it. I don't know.
No, I would agree. I mean, they have really tried to downplay that victory. I mean, even yesterday, Brett Martell from the AP asked Clint Kubiak, like, "Hey, did you hear from your family or like your friends on the game? What did they say?" She's like, "On to the next game."
He's spoken like a coach's son.
It was, he said that. So he was specifically asked about Gary Kubiak, his dad, and they said they talked about the Panthers game for 5 minutes, and then they moved on, and Gary wanted to know about the Cowboys and was asking all about their defense rather than focusing on it. So even in the Kubiak household, not too much time spent on that victory.
I mean, you can make a pretty easy argument. You got to put at Kansas City as the Saints' toughest game, but this is probably their second toughest game on their schedule. at this point. I don't,
this or next week's.
Yeah, or Philly at home.
But
that's
it would have been on the road.
That one's at home, so
probably
this is
say.
on the road.
Yeah.
We'll see how things shape up. There's always teams that are better or worse than you thought they were going to be, but this looks like a pretty difficult test. And so if the Saints can pass this one, then it'll really be time to get excited. Now, can they do it? Time for predictions. Saints at Cowboys. We talked about this. The last team to beat the Cowboys in Arlington in the regular season was an NFC South team. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tom Brady's debut. They won 19-3, and that was the day that Dak Prescott got hurt. Now, that was late in the game, I think, that he got hurt. They were going to lose anyway. But the Saints, I don't think, are going to win this game 19-3. That would be something. But they have not lost a game since then. By the way, if you go back a couple of home games before that, the previous year they lost 2 home games. One of them was 36-33 in overtime to Derek Carr's Raiders. So it can be done, but it hasn't been done in a while. Jeff Duncan, he's not here. He picked the Cowboys to win this one 21-16, kind of a defensive battle, thinking that maybe those defensive lines dominate. Rod, you're up next.
I don't really have a good justification for this, but
oh, come on.
I don't know if I drank the Kool-Aid last week, but I picked the Saints 24-20, I think, and I just think that they are going to be able to run the ball, and I just think they're going to get off to a good start, and I think if they can do that, and I just think the team might be a little better than I thought they were last week, and I know I shouldn't be basing it on a Carolina Panthers game, but that's what I'm basing it on, and I know how dominant the Cowboys are at home, but I just think the Saints are going to somehow find a way to get it done, and I think Kubiak may have been holding back a little bit last week, and I think he's going to go full throttle this week.
Yeah, I love it, Rod.
Hey,
and it'll give me a lead. Well, never mind. Never mind.
I don't mind a contrarian pick. I was the one who said that the Saints could go 1-1. Losing to the Panthers and beating the Cowboys. Obviously, that's not what I picked last week, and it's not what I'm picking this week. I just get stuck on Dallas has that offense humming at home. I don't know if it's a turf thing, if it's a crowd thing, whatever it is. Dak Prescott seems to play really well at home. And so even though I think the Saints defense can probably get a couple of shots in, I think the Cowboys generally pull away in this game, and I have 27-17 Cowboys. Luke?
All right, so back when the schedule came out, I picked the Saints to win this game, and I am too much of a coward to stick with that. So I picked the Cowboys to win 28-24. I absolutely would not be surprised if the Saints did win this game, because I think a lot of the stuff they did last week against Carolina will carry over against better teams. I think they're going to give people a lot of problems offensively, and we've all talked ad nauseum about how good we think their defense is. All that being said, I'm really scared of the idea of the Saints' offensive line playing without Tali Fuaga, maybe without Lucas Patrick. You're down to your 6th and 7th offensive linemen against a team that had 25 pressures and 6 sacks last week. It's a really, really tall task. Wouldn't surprise me if the Cowboys had a defensive touchdown in this game. Making life really, really difficult on Derek Carr, who historically has been a much different quarterback when he's under a lot of pressure. So it's too much for me in this matchup, and I think leaning Cowboys, but I think it'll be closer than the spread initially says.
Yeah. Well, as we mentioned at the top, Matt, one of the NFL's marquee games of week 2, a couple of 1-0 teams. Who's going to 2-0?
The Cowboys. I had it 31-28. I think it'll be a little bit higher scoring game just because I think the Saints can move the ball, but just think the Cowboys' defensive line is really going to come through in those big moments. And, yeah, I just think Micah Parsons, we haven't really talked about how good he is just in terms of, this show. I mean, he's recognized as one of the best players in the league, but I just think, I've seen so many instances of Trevor Penning struggling with speed, and that dude is maybe the fastest defensive lineman in the league. So, I just like the Cowboys.
All right. Gabe Henderson on the Datitude podcast had this stat, so I'll throw it out there too. Dennis Allen with the Saints after a victory is 4-10-1 against the spread. So not good numbers after a victory. So we'll see if he can change that. You guys all have Saints with the points, I think, right? 6 points?
Yeah.
Everybody's.
I would change if Fuaga's out, I would change it to the Cowboys to cover. But that's
All right.
Just me.
Yeah, that's the caveat. We'll find out. We'll find out today if he practices. We won't find out till Sunday if he's actually playing. Saints and Cowboys is at noon. We'll have a post-game show for you on these same channels about 20 minutes after the game at AT&T Stadium. Also want to let you know, I forgot to say this, our Keys to the Game segment was proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Norman Bell's our producer today. Our thanks to him. For Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Matthew Paris, I'm Zach Ewing. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Join us for the postgame show on Sunday, Saints and Cowboys. We'll talk to you then.